Good evening, everybody. Today on Frugal Finance, we're going to talk about buy-to-let property. Is it dead? Are we done with it? Has Section 24 legislation ruined it? Who knows? Without further ado, let's get stuck into the video. So as you probably know, as a property developer of sorts or someone interested in the property market, that George Osborne introduced legislation around financing cost relief. So what I mean by that is that if you've got a property and it nets you or grosses you, £1,000 a month from the tenant, and then you pay a mortgage of £500. Now, previously under the old legislation, you were allowed to take the interest element of that mortgage. So let's say that mortgage payment of £500 was interest only. Take that and deduct that from your tax return. So effectively, you've only earned £500. To keep things simple, essentially Section 24 legislation, fast forward a number of years because it's been phased in, means that you can no longer claim your finance costs against your tax return. So essentially, whilst there are still some minor costs you can claim in connection with it, you will end up basically paying tax on the full amount of money without the finance costs deducted. This has made it really unviable for most landlords, to be honest, especially your accidental landlords, the ones that perhaps own one or two properties. Maybe there were a couple and they've moved into one of the houses themselves or properties, and then they've rented the other one out. They might have remortgaged it to do some home improvements or something, and now they're in a pickle because basically after they've paid the tax bill and they've paid the mortgage, there is no profit in it. So therefore the only profit is appreciation in the value of the property, and obviously that isn't always guaranteed. So they might exit the market and sell. So you would say buy-to-let is a bit of a dead horse really nowadays. I think Section 24 has sort of really scuppered it for most people. But you can get around Section 24 by purchasing your properties in a company name. The companies are allowed to claim their finance costs as tax deductible still, and therefore if you go into property, really you should be looking at buying through a company vehicle. There are lots of associated costs with that, and I'll touch on those in another video. But essentially that is the kind of new way now, and my belief is that the government really want people that do buy-to-let or become landlords to be professional landlords. They don't really want your kind of Susan and John who rent one flat out somewhere or other as a small retirement fund, or maybe they're accidental landlords. They want to make landlords much more professional, but become companies and actual business. So they've made it less attractive for people to do that. Obviously there are ways around that, and if you haven't got a mortgage to pay, obviously Section 24 doesn't affect you. So that is, to me, one of the main reasons buy-to-let might be deemed to be dead. But I think that in 2021, you need to look at where the market is probably going to go and try and be one step ahead. We're entering into a time now where if you're a property developer of some nature, it's one of those golden opportunities where probably property will come quite cheap to the market. You need to find those deals, but there'll be lots of motivated sellers in the next probably 24 months or so. And realistically, if you've got a company vehicle set up, then you are in a good position to do that. There are lots of people like Ranjan Bhattacharya who talk about various things like commercial to residential conversions and so on. That's obviously for your slightly bigger developer, although one day you get into that as you go along your journey. But if you're just talking about your kind of bog standard person with maybe 4 or 5 properties looking to maybe increase that to 7 or 8 or something, I think buy to let is still a viable option for them. Obviously you can flip properties, that is a short-term gain though, it doesn't give you passive income from a tenant, but obviously gives you lump sum money back. Now the BRRRR system is probably what most people should be focusing in on for 2021 and for some time to come. If you are kind of minor landlord, perhaps you've got a limited company set up and you've got half a dozen properties or less, I think BRRRR is the key thing for you to focus in on for now. And it will help you keep ticking over in these uncertain times. So what is BRRRR? I think I've said enough R's, but anyway, lots of R's after the B. So the first point of that BRRRR is buy. So the B stands for buy. That means buy a property. And when we mean buy a property, we don't just mean any old property from a developer or from the guy down the road and it's a pretty nice house and you like the view from it. We're talking about buying below market value. You want to be trying to buy probably around about 30 to 40% less than the market value. I know that seems a lot. Those deals are out there to have. You have motivated sellers and you should be able to find those if you look hard enough. You've also got to remember that hopefully you can buy a property that ticks a few boxes. So one is that you're going to buy it below market value, and another one is that you're going to add value to it, and another one is there are options on it. What if you can't find a tenant? Could you consider HMO? Could you rent out individual rooms? Could you look at selling it on? Could you look at knocking it down? Could you look at developing it? You know, all those sort of things. What are your various avenues for, plan B, plan C and so on. So those are what make up a good property deal. Now, someone said to me once, if your first offer doesn't embarrass you when you put it forward, it probably isn't low enough. I like that phrase, but it won't be for everybody. But a rule of thumb, you want to be trying to get 30 to 40% low, and that comes into the R, which is refurbish. So the first thing you need to do, obviously, once you've bought your property, is refurbish it. Now, the problem is if you haven't bought it below market value, you may not have enough play or wiggle room to refurbish it. And you also need to look at refurbishing it to a standard that is applicable for your market. There's no point in you putting gold taps in and red carpets and all the bells and whistles and the latest Wi-Fi technology and heating systems and so on if it's a 2-bed flat in a multi-story block of flats which is going to rent the same amount of money as every other flat that's in there. You need to refurbish your property to the standard of the area, not your personal standard. Your personal standard might be very high, and I do think it's a good benchmark to have to say I will only refurbish properties to a certain standard that I would be willing to live in. Obviously, if you wouldn't live there, why would you expect somebody else to? I apply that to my own portfolio, but you have to remember that you need to refurbish the property to a standard that is applicable for the area that it is in and the type of tenant that you're going to get in there. Obviously, if you're in a grade 2 manor house listed or something which has fantastic grounds and the rest of it, that's going to expect to be to a high standard. So you need to apply that. So that's the refurbishment element, the R of the first R. The next thing is R, again, surprisingly, which is for rent. So buy, refurbish, rent. So the next thing is rent, and you get that passive income coming in. Obviously, we've talked about company vehicles to buy property through versus buying it in your own name, but rent is the key factor in this. You need to rent the property. Now, the rental market's quite buoyant at the moment. Obviously, you need to be careful whether you're going for good quality tenants. You need to have them checked out, or if the council are paying their rent, then that can be a secure way. Hopefully the councils won't go bust, but You know, whether you're having guarantors, all that kind of stuff, you need to make sure that your rental thing is protected as best as possible. But the R of BRRR is to rent. So buy, refurbish, rent. Now, what's the next thing? Refinance. So the next R is refinance. So you bought your property at 30 to 40% below market value, you've refurbished it, you've rented it out, now you need to refinance it and release that money. So if you bought a £200,000 3-bed semi-detached house and you've refurbished it and you've got your tenant in it, when you refinance it and you paid £150,000 and the property is now worth £200,000 because you've done your research and that's what they're worth done up and in that street, in that location, you've effectively got back £50,000, which is probably your deposit on the £150,000 minus fees, legal expenses and the rest. It's okay to leave a little bit of meat in the game. Obviously the end goal is really to make a profit, or at least draw out all your money and be sat back with the same pot of money. But you must accept in the early days, you are probably going to leave some money in there. You also have to remember that refinancing is generally problematic up to 6 months worth of ownership. So you can get some non-high street lenders that will remortgage earlier than 6 months, but realistically most lenders are looking for ownership of 6 months. I'm sure there's a reason for that, and maybe we can ask my broker at some point for the actual reason behind that, or maybe someone can comment below. But the general rule of thumb is you have to wait 6 months before you refinance. So that brings me on to the final R. Repeat. Simple. Take that money you've just refinanced, take it all into one pot. You've got all your money out, you've got your passive income from your tenant, maybe that passive income's topping up any shortfall you had from when you refinanced. Take that and go again. Repeat. It's just a license to continue growing. Obviously this relies upon a few key factors: buying below market rate or extending and developing, refinancing and getting a tenant in. Those are the key things really, because without them you're not going to have that money to then go again. Obviously you need to also be aware of things like the level of equity that's in your property. So at the beginning of your journey, when you're young, maybe in your early 20s, it's okay to have quite a high equity to ownership, to debt, level. But as you get further down your career, you don't really want to be doing that. So ideally, I think when you've got to kind of 10 BRRRs, buy, refurbish, refinance, you should probably consider using some of that income to pay down some of the mortgages, or maybe reinvest or do some other avenues. But around 10 or so is probably a good mark to aim for. You don't want to end up at the other end where you've got to sell quite a few of them in order to pay off the mortgages. So you know, you need to watch out for that kind of end goal really. I mean, if you've got 10 properties and they're netting you an income before tax of £500 each, you've got £5,000 coming in. You can, per month that is, you can afford to then start to put that money aside. Obviously some people might want to give up their jobs at that stage, but it will depend on where you are in the life cycle as to quite what your needs are. Obviously, as per every video, this is for entertainment purposes only. You need to seek independent financial advice if you're looking to pursue any of these things. Your capital is at risk, and there's lots of disclaimers down in the comment section, the descriptions, but realistically you need to seek your own advice if you're unsure as to what you're doing. These are for entertainment purposes only, so they are not financial guidance. With that said, if you could smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, it really does help with the YouTube algorithms to get them out there, gets this video pumped out to more people, a fresher audience, and then helps grow the channel, and in turn will hopefully result in better videos for you with various equipment. I'd like to do some collaborations with various people throughout the year, so hopefully you will subscribe, hit the like button, comment below. There's a notification button as well, so you don't miss any of the videos. There's lots of descriptions below, various links to Trading 212 if you want a free stock. Please deposit money with them, and then you get a free share valued up to £100. There's also affiliate links to various financial books below from Amazon. Click on them. I do receive a small commission. It's pence, but I would prefer that you read up on these books and enjoyed them and you took some knowledge from them. So with that said, I will leave you to it. Have a good evening, and please do subscribe and share the video. See you next time.